We do have a couple of photo albums we're passing around. And I believe back on the table is a copy of her eulogy with some good stories from the kids. Hello, my name is Mark DeCourcey. I'm happy to be here and proud to be part of this outfit. Cassie DeCourcey, maiden name von Borstel, was my mother. I can't tell all that she was or what she meant to me, but here is a glimpse of her history. Cassie was born on August 26, 1924, at the family ranch near Kent. She was Ted and Millie's second child after Donald and their first daughter. She spent her childhood on the ranch and attended grade school in Kent, which had a 1st through 12th grade school. For high school, she attended St. Mary's Academy in the Dalles, which was a boarding school. She returned to the ranch for holidays and special occasions. She graduated from St. Mary's in 1942. Cassie made lifelong friends at St. Mary's and went on to attend nursing school at St. Anthony's Hospital in Pendleton. She graduated with a degree in nursing in 1948. Cassie met Keith on the ranch when they were both 16. Keith lived in Maupin and worked summers at the ranch. He told the story of asking Ted for a raise, and Ted said, "You need to talk to Millie." Millie said no. In 1945, Keith was an ensign in the Navy and was in San Diego about to ship out for Okinawa. The Navy was getting pounded there at the time by Japanese kamikazes and losing many men. Cassie and Keith were 22. Cassie and her cousin Margaret rode the train to San Diego, and Cassie and Keith were married. Keith's ship was in Honolulu when the war ended, fortunately. They started out in Eugene, where Keith taught at the high school, and Michael was born. Next was Prineville, where Mark and Paul were born, and then the Dalles, where Douglas was born. In 1960, they came to Gresham. Cassie first worked at St. Jude's Hospital in Sandy for a short time, and then as a supervising nurse at Woodland Park Hospital in Portland. There she saw injuries and illness from minor to grave. Sometimes she came home emotional with blood on her uniform. She had worked on a young man who had come in busted up from a car crash. The young man reminded her of her boys. We never understood her anxiety when we went out at night and didn't return till late. I do now. I have the same anxiety for my loved ones. She came home from a full shift at the hospital and fixed us all dinner, and then cleaned up and hopefully caught an episode of Gunsmoke. She loved that. Cassie and Keith were divorced in 1975, which left Cassie with 5 young men living in her basement, the 5th being a friend of one of her boys. Cassie cooked for all of us and doctored our injuries. This included any girlfriends. She enjoyed visits from Kenny and Marie, cooking for her boys and their friends, tending her roses, going to the beach, and watching her boys grow and start their own families. After Patty and I had children, we both worked full-time, and she would cook us dinner once a week and bring it over to our house, and we would sit down with her and enjoy dinner. Those were good times. Cassie never put up with any nonsense from our girls. She taught us all how to clean a wound. That is, to scrub the hell out of it with soap and water. And that's a fact. Cassie was persnickety about cleanliness and washing your hands. I'm sorry we never took her serious, but COVID taught us she was right. She wouldn't handle used currency, saying you have no idea where that's been. When she needed cash, she went to the bank and got brand new bills. After her retirement, Cassie spent some years in the Dalles caring for Millie, and then some years in Hood River helping Rita with Wes. She was tenacious and determined and loving and caring. I loved her and will miss her always. These are the stories that didn't make the cut. I think I came in close to 3. The whole time I was writing it, I was trying to come in at 3 minutes. We had to put one of our labs down. He had been hit by a car and fractured his spine. At the vet, he was on a stainless steel table when they put him down. Cassie hugged him and sobbed. I was struck by her emotion, her emotional response. She loved that dog. We were remodeling our house for 6 months. For 6 months, we moved in with Cassie. She had lots of space. It was a good time. The girls expected me to give them a quarter every time I said a swear word. They tried that on Cassie, and she wouldn't have it. She said, if I want to say crap in my own home, that's the way it's going to be. That was a great experience, I think, for the girls, because Cassie, loving and caring, but didn't take any nonsense from the kids. Cassie had beautiful, tiny, cursive handwriting, a result of writing on charts as a nurse. Every single letter right out of a writing book. I'm proud to have known Cassie. I hope some part of me, I hope some part of her lives on in me and my children. Thank you.
So Cassie was a character, to say the least. And one thing I want to share, a couple things I want to share with you guys before I tell my story, is that she had those 4 boys, and she always wanted a little girl to spoil. And guess who she spoiled? It was so much fun. She spoiled me rotten. And I lived with the DeCourceys after I graduated from high school before I went on to college because I wasn't ready to leave home, and she took very good care of me. But the story I want to tell is when she came to help my mother with Wes. And before she came up, she was sitting with my mother, and she says, Rita, you can't keep taking care of him. His Alzheimer's is too bad. I'm going to close up my house, and I'm going to come stay with you. And my mother says, it won't do any good, Cassie. Don't bother. And Cassie says, well, why not? And she says, well, because he has sundowners, and he wanders around at night, and unless I'm in bed with him, he's going to wander and get in trouble. So if you came up and stayed, it wouldn't do any good anyway. I couldn't leave him because I have to stay in bed with him all night. And Aunt Cassie said, are you two still sexually active? And my mother said, God, I wish. And so Cassie said, Rita, I'm going to move in, and you're going to go to the beach, and I will sleep with Wes. No one will ever know. So my mother went to the beach, and before Cassie went up and went to bed, she fell down. And she crawled up the stairs, and she crawled in bed with Wes. And in the middle of the night, she had to go to the bathroom, and she could not get up. She was in so much pain, she could not get out of bed. And she tried, and she tried, and she finally called my stepbrother Mick. And Mick came over, and when he tells his story, he goes, Imagine my surprise. So Mick is a big guy, about 6'2", and he comes up and he's trying to get Aunt Cassie out of bed to go to the bathroom, and she's just in excruciating pain and he can't get her up. And he says, Cassie, I just have to call 911. So she had broken her hip, they got her to the hospital, but you know, Hood River is a small town, so no one will ever know, and the whole town of Hood River knew my aunt was sleeping with my mother's husband.
Well, I was old before when, or I was 6 years old, I believe, when my grandma passed, but I was 4 when we stayed with her, when we lived with her, and my dad said that, you know, the arrangement was like him and my mom sleeping in the room, and they kind of figured me and my sister would be in the room. Well, Grandma made my sister sleep right in between my parents for 6 months, because she didn't want any funny business in her house. So I slept with Grandma. My sister slept with Mom and Dad for 6 months. So I'm sure they found a way, but it wasn't in her house. So.
How would she feel about you telling that story? She wouldn't care, right? She'd be like, you're right here in my house. Right.
Anyone else have a story? Yes, Sister Krista.
I would like to hear about a story that I've heard, that one of the boys' eyes got knocked out. I don't know if that's true, and she poked back in.
Something about someone's eyes getting poked out and she poked it back in.
Yes.
That's actually, that story I think is in her epilogue. Her eulogy.
Let me give you the mic so we can get this recorded.
This is a story from Keith. He said back then they had refrigerators with horizontal handles. And Mike was playing, and he stood a little too close to the refrigerator, and he took the handle right in his eye socket. Popped his eye out.
Oh my gosh.
And Keith was like, apathetic. And Cassie went over there, stuck his eye back.
How was his eyesight after that?
I guess the muscles on your eye are flexible. And it went back in, and he's been fine.
Wow. All right.
Props to... Well, you know, my mother and Aunt Rita and Aunt Cassie got together every year, and they went to Portland, and they'd stay in the Benson Hotel, and they would spend money, and they would just have fun together. And any of us that lived in the area, we would go over usually and see them, have dinner with them, whatever. And the thing that I always loved about Aunt Cassie, Aunt Rita and my mother, you know, they'd be going back and forth, just steady. You know, one or the other, saying something smart, something funny, whatever. And whatever it was, Aunt Cassie would stop and she'd say, now, Rita, you know that didn't happen. Does it sound like her? Or Marie, that did not happen. And she was so great the way she would just stop and look at them like they were dead serious about everything, and she could just do a flat look. And you'd think she didn't get it. She did. She got it. But she was funnier because she said it the way she said it. She was fun, though. She was fun to be around. I had a lot of fun going over and having dinner with them, having one night in the Benson Hotel and have dinner with them. It was a lot of fun. And you got to know they started looking a lot more alike as they got older. Did anybody notice that? They started looking a little more alike. So, anyway.
I have something to add to that story. I usually went down and spent some time with them, had dinner, and spent some time in their room. They were really having fun on those trips. And they really enjoyed each other's company. Cassie, when she went down there, she always brought a supply of alcohol wipes. And first thing in the room, she would go around and sanitize everything that people touch. All the handles, the TV remote, the handle on the toilet, all that stuff. And I swear we thought she was a little nuts. But as COVID taught us, it wasn't. She had to kill those germs. And who knows who was touching those things? Or who didn't wash their hands after they went to